Have you ever loved Jesus so deeply that it filled your heart with joy, even as a child? Imagine the kind of love that makes every moment of your day a prayer, every action a gift to Him. Today, we'll uncover the remarkable story of someone who did just that, a young girl whose love for Jesus and the Eucharist was so pure, so intense, that it became her entire life's purpose. This is the story of Blessed Imelda Lambertini, a child saint whose extraordinary devotion to Christ brought her to a miraculous encounter with the Eucharist and straight into heaven. Born into a world very different from ours, she reminds us that the love of Jesus transcends time and age. Imelda was no ordinary child. From a very young age, her heart burned with a desire for something far greater than the world could offer. She longed to give her life to Jesus, to belong completely to Him. And while many children of her time were content with the simplicity of their faith, Imelda had a profound yearning, a longing that would shape the rest of her brief but inspiring life. But what makes her story truly unforgettable is how her journey culminated in a miraculous event so powerful, so awe-inspiring, that it left even the holiest people around her in wonder. And it all happened because of her unshakable desire to unite with Jesus in the Eucharist. To understand the incredible life of Blessed Imelda Lambertini, we must travel back in time to the year 1322 in the beautiful city of Bologna, Italy. Imagine a world filled with cobblestone streets, towering cathedrals, and the rhythmic chant of prayers echoing through monasteries. It was here, in a noble and devout Catholic family, that a little girl named Imelda was born. From the very beginning, Imelda's life was steeped in the faith. Her parents, recognizing the beauty and importance of their Catholic heritage, made prayer and devotion a central part of their household. But even they could not have imagined the depth of love that would take root in their young daughter's heart. As a child, Imelda stood out for her extraordinary innocence and quiet wisdom. While other children her age were playing in the fields or learning the simple tasks of daily life, Imelda seemed drawn to something greater. She loved the quiet of the chapel, the flickering of candles before the altar, and the sacred mystery of Massachusetts. It was as though, even at a young age, she could sense the presence of Christ in ways far beyond her years. Imelda's family noticed her special devotion early on. By the time she was just 5 years old, she was already asking deep questions about Jesus, the Eucharist, and heaven. Her favorite moments were those spent in prayer, her small hands clasped tightly, her face glowing with childlike wonder. To those who knew her, it was clear, this little girl's heart was already set on God. But what truly marked Imelda's path was her unwavering desire to give herself entirely to Jesus. At just 9 years old, a tender age when most children are still discovering the world, she made a remarkable decision. She asked her parents for permission to enter the Dominican convent at Valdepietra, where she could live among the sisters and dedicate her life to prayer and service. For her parents, this request must have been bittersweet. Letting go of their beloved daughter at such a young age was no doubt a sacrifice. But they also recognized the purity of her calling and the deep faith that guided her. And so, with heavy hearts but trusting in God's plan, they agreed. In the convent, Imelda's devotion only deepened. Surrounded by the quiet rhythm of religious life, she blossomed in her love for Jesus. The other sisters were astonished by her piety and her unwavering focus during prayer. They saw in her a soul far beyond her years, one that seemed to already live in the light of heaven. Yet, even in the holy surroundings of the convent, there was one longing in Imelda's heart that remained unfulfilled. Despite her deep love for Jesus and her incredible devotion, she had not yet received her first communion. At the time, church tradition reserved this sacrament for older children, believing that the Eucharist required a deeper understanding than a young girl like Imelda might possess. But Imelda, in her innocence and purity, knew in her heart that she was ready to receive Jesus, whom she loved more than anything in the world. And so, she waited, praying each day with increasing fervor, her heart burning with a desire that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Little did she know, This longing would lead to a miraculous event that would forever define her place in the hearts of the faithful. Her days in the convent began early, with the rising sun casting golden light into the chapel. There, among the Dominican sisters, Imelda would kneel in prayer, her small frame motionless, her heart entirely absorbed in the presence of God. While others might have struggled with the demands of the religious life, Imelda embraced them with joy. She saw every task, no matter how small, as a chance to grow closer to Jesus. Whether helping with simple chores or praying the divine office, she did it all with a radiant smile and a heart full of love. What stood out most to the sisters was her remarkable devotion to the Eucharist. Even though she was too young to receive communion, she would sit quietly during Mass, her eyes fixed on the altar, her face glowing with reverence. It was clear to everyone around her that Imelda's love for Jesus was not an ordinary love. It was something extraordinary, something deeply mystical. She often asked the sisters about the Eucharist, her voice filled with wonder. "How is it," she would say, "that God can make himself so small and humble to come to us in the host?" For her, the Eucharist was not just a symbol or a ritual. It was the living, breathing presence of Christ. And though she had not yet been allowed to receive him, she longed for the day when she could welcome him into her heart. Imelda's life in the convent wasn't just about her personal devotion. She also brought joy and inspiration to those around her. The sisters would often remark on her simplicity and purity, describing her as a little angel among them. Her humility and kindness were evident in everything she did, from comforting a sister who was feeling down to quietly offering up her own small sacrifices in prayer for others. Yet, beneath her gentle and cheerful demeanor, there was an ache in her heart, a longing so intense it often brought tears to her eyes. She wanted to receive Jesus in the Eucharist, to experience the profound union she believed came through Holy Communion. The sisters could see this longing, and though they were moved by her desire, they were bound by the traditions of the time. Still, they often wondered, was this child's love for the Eucharist a sign of something greater, something divine? Little did they know, Imelda's faith and longing were preparing her for a moment of grace that would touch the lives of everyone in the convent, and ultimately, Catholics around the world. As Blessed Imelda Lambertini continued her life in the convent, her love for Jesus grew stronger with every passing day. But there was one longing in her heart that she could not ignore, her desire to receive him in the Eucharist. For Imelda, Holy Communion wasn't just a sacrament. It was the fulfillment of her deepest wish, the ultimate way to unite with the one she loved most. Yet, there was a challenge. In the 14th century, the Church had strict traditions regarding the age at which children could receive their first communion. It was believed that young ones might not fully understand the sacred mystery of the Eucharist. And so, despite her evident devotion, Imelda was told she had to wait. But waiting didn't dampen her desire. It only made it stronger. Each time she saw the sisters receive Holy Communion during Mass, her heart burned with a longing she could scarcely contain. She would kneel quietly in the pews, her hands clasped tightly in prayer, her eyes fixed on the altar. In those moments, she wasn't just a little girl watching a sacred ritual. She was a soul yearning for the divine, a heart aching to be one with her Savior. Imelda often spoke to the sisters about her longing. "How can anyone receive Jesus and not die of love?" she once asked, her voice filled with wonder. For her, the Eucharist was the closest anyone could come to heaven while still on earth. It wasn't enough for her to admire Jesus from a distance. She wanted to welcome him into her very being, to feel his presence within her soul. The sisters, moved by her words and her unwavering devotion, began to see Imelda's longing as something extraordinary. This was not the impatience of a child who simply wanted what she couldn't have. It was the pure and unselfish desire of a heart entirely given to God. Even the older nuns, who had spent decades in prayer and contemplation, found themselves inspired by her faith. They began to wonder, could it be that this young girl, so innocent and full of love, truly understood the Eucharist better than anyone? But despite their admiration, the rules remained unchanged. Imelda continued to wait, her prayers growing more fervent, her longing ever more profound. She would spend hours in the chapel, pouring out her heart to Jesus, asking him to come to her in his own time, in his own way. And while she waited, she offered every moment as a gift to him, a sacrifice of love, a prayer of hope. What Imelda didn't know was that her prayers were about to be answered in the most miraculous way imaginable. The day was coming when her longing would be fulfilled, not by the hands of men, but by a divine act that would leave everyone around her in awe. The day was May 12th, 1333, the Vigil of the Ascension, a day of prayer and preparation, one filled with the promise of Christ's return to the Father. In the small Dominican convent at Valdepetra, Blessed Imelda Lambertini knelt in the chapel. As she so often did, her heart lifted toward heaven. This day, however, was different. Imelda's longing for the Eucharist had reached an almost unbearable intensity. She had spent years praying, waiting, and hoping for the moment she could finally receive Jesus into her heart. The sisters, as usual, were gathered for Massachusetts Imelda, too young to receive Holy Communion according to the traditions of the time, watched from her place of prayer. Her small frame seemed still, but her heart was ablaze with love. She prayed silently, her words known only to God, pouring out her soul to him. Her longing wasn't just a child's wish. It was a cry from the depths of her spirit, an unspoken plea to be united with the Lord she loved so deeply. As the Mass continued, something extraordinary began to happen. A bright light appeared in the chapel, illuminating the space with an otherworldly radiance. The sisters, startled, turned their gaze toward the source of the light. There, hovering in the air above Imelda, was a consecrated host, the body of Christ, held aloft by an invisible hand. The chapel fell silent, the air thick with the presence of the divine. The priest, recognizing the miracle unfolding before him, approached Imelda with awe. He knew there was no other explanation. This was a heavenly sign, a confirmation that Imelda was indeed ready to receive her first communion. And so, with trembling hands, he took the host and placed it gently on her tongue. The moment Imelda received Jesus in the Eucharist, her face radiated a joy that words could never capture. She seemed to be caught up in a heavenly ecstasy, as though the veil between earth and heaven had been lifted, and she was standing in the very presence of God. The sisters, witnesses to this miraculous event, knelt in awe and reverence, their own faith deepened by what they had seen. Imelda remained in prayer, her eyes closed, her face serene. For her, this was the moment she had longed for, the moment she had prayed for with all her heart. She had finally received Jesus, not just into her soul, but into her very being. It was the fulfillment of a love so pure, so intense, that it could only have come from God. It was as if God had chosen to take her directly into his presence, granting her the ultimate reward for her unwavering faith and love. Blessed Imelda Lambertini, the child saint who had longed so deeply for the Eucharist, had received her first communion, and with it, her heavenly crown. The sisters, though heartbroken by her sudden passing, knew they had witnessed something sacred, something divine. Imelda's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph, a holy moment that reminded them, and all of us, of the power and beauty of the Eucharist. Word of Imelda's holy death quickly spread beyond the convent walls, reaching the faithful throughout Bologna and beyond. People were moved by the story of the young girl whose love for the Eucharist was so intense that it brought her directly into the presence of God. Pilgrims began to visit the convent, drawn by the holiness of her life and the miraculous nature of her passing. Imelda's story didn't end with her death. It marked the beginning of her role as an intercessor and an example of childlike faith and love for the Eucharist. Her body, found to be incorrupt, was later enshrined in the Church of San Sigismondo in Bologna, where it remains to this day, a testament to her sanctity. The life of Blessed Imelda Lambertini is a beautiful reminder of the transformative power of love for Jesus, especially in the Eucharist. Her unwavering faith and deep devotion show us that age is no barrier to holiness. Imelda's story challenges us to reflect on our own relationship with Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith and inspiration. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.